Good evening, everyone. A very warm welcome to everybody who's watching us live on Facebook and LinkedIn, and on this fabulous and a very interesting discussion on the changes in the EdTech sector amid the COVID-19. COVID-19, when it struck last year in March, was almost like a disturbance. The world as we know it came to scrambles. Everybody was worried. How will our offices continue? How will our daily lives continue? And most importantly, how will our learning and the students and teachers continue? But nothing withstood in the way. Life found a way out of it. Obstruction changed into opportunity, and disturbance actually became a disruption in the edtech sectors, all thanks to multiple levels of efforts done by teachers, educators, academicians, and many companies who are working relentlessly to ensure that no child stays at home uneducated. United Nations data suggests that close to 1,750,000 children were locked in at home with no means to study. Does this mean that education stopped, school stopped, or learning stopped? No. In fact, learning took a new meaning. All of us have relatives, have kids at home who are reading on laptops, who are learning new ways through modules, who are learning through over the internet. All this thanks to fabulous teachers and fabulous educators who have gone out of their ways and made an obstruction into an opportunities. Without deliberating much on COVID-19 and its challenges, let us look at the opportunities. Gauging this, Edufront, a leading learning management software provider, and TechGig have conceived this session for all of you educators and academicians to come and talk about the multitude of challenges and plethora of opportunities that we have here. Let us talk about many, many things that came in our way and will continue in years to come. And COVID-19 will never be seen like a black mark. It will be rather seen as a year of opportunity for all of you. I have curated a wonderful panel with me who are leaders in their own forte, who bring with them years of experience and years of learning. And I have with me an August panel comprising of Mr. Satish Jha, the committee co-chair, TIE Edu SIG chairman of ReachScale. He founded OLPC India Foundation, and he's the former editor of Dinamaan from the Times of India Group. He's also the co-founder of Jansatta from the Indian Express Group, and he's the chairman of Edufront. Welcome, sir. I have with me Dr. Usha Ram. She's the founder principal of Sadhu Vaswani International School, former principal of Laxman Public School, New Delhi. She's the first Asian woman to receive first Dan Black Belt honorary by the International Federation. Welcome, ma'am. I also have with me Mr. Shantanu Jha. He's the co-founder of a leading education management solution provider, Edufront. Welcome, sir. I have with me a very august personality, last but not the least, Ma'am Geeta Gangwani. She is the British School Ambassador. She's received Global Teacher Accreditation from the British School. She's curated Flex books, ebooks at CK12 org. She's got State Award in 2015 and MHRD National Award in 2017. With this gracious panel, I have with me a fabulous audience, 500 plus academicians and principals and educators who signed up to be a part of this wonderful session here today, and more than 80,000 plus people who are watching us live on LinkedIn and the Facebook channels of TechGig. For only one sole reason, let us dedicate 1 hour to talk about the fabulous opportunities that we have in learning in the edtech sector and how to keep growing, renovating, because teachers are no more teachers. Teachers are innovators. With that being said, let me not take much of your time and let me open the house for discussion. I would like to begin talking to Mr. Satish, sir. Satish, sir, the pertinent need to reimagine education and accelerate change in teaching and learning. Like I said, when COVID-19 came, everybody was unsure of, how to step out of home. And if that does not happen, what happens to learning? What happens to education? And how did the educator sector, the professionals perceive it and overcame this barrier? Would you like to throw some insights here, please?
Well, you threw a question and I have to find an answer.
Yes.
One challenge always is when I looked at what suddenly came upon us that we couldn't go to schools, teachers couldn't go to
Mhm.
schools, none of us could come together at a place. Technology had to come and find a solution to that. That solution existed, but when you to use any technology, we need some major events happening. Just think of it this
Great.
way: we imagine 30 years back when I was doing my MBA, how the world is going to shape up and what we are doing today, we imagined 30 years ago. But it's taken that long and a major event in the world to bring us together like this. Having said that, what's happening is we are again paying attention to a smaller part, how to deliver.
Mhm.
The question of pedagogy has always been there. There are many people, leaders of industry, they have looked at how to educate, how to help children learn, and how to help teachers be ahead of the curve in helping children learn. For instance, if teachers grew up 30 years back, so their
Mhm.
knowledge base is of 30 years ago, and they
Mhm.
keep on building on that. But building on that knowledge is not the same thing as being in it. So the younger
Totally.
generation is always closer to the future. That's the first thing. Pedagogy keeps evolving at its own pace. But what's happened today is the delivery model has come under pressure, and we have found a response to that using technology. Most importantly, we expected that probably the internet system will not be able to take the load, but
Mhm.
internet
Yes. True.
system somehow the way we designed withstood the test of the times. So what is happening as of now, we are trying to figure out how to deliver education or learning remotely to every child, and how do you connect the teachers, how to connect everyone in the learning ecosystem with each other so that they don't feel that the coming together in a school was something they were missing. To give you an example, when we created one laptop per child at MIT about 15 years back, one of the key aspects of that was if there was no school building, if there's no school teacher, if you just threw that laptop, which actually was a complete ecosystem in itself, and nothing in the market even today comes close to that. So how do you learn without school building? How do you learn without teacher? Teacher is everybody. Teachers,
True.
the way we define them, in a school system, they are an employee first. But in a learning system, they are great facilitators. So, in other words, redefine the role of a teacher. A teacher is a
Mhm.
facilitator who learns. And what's happening as of today is we are addressing the question of technology of delivery of education, much more than pedagogy. And that's where we have seen we need infrastructure. 90% schools don't have infrastructure for that. So they are taking the parents' phones. They're trying to learn from. That's not how learning will happen. But learning always is happening. No matter what challenges happen to us, human beings learn all the time. Question is, what do they learn, and do they get ready for tomorrow? I don't know if it answers your
Mhm.
question, but basically what we're trying to do with the first stage is to create the learning ecosystem, create the learning infrastructure. That's where Edufront has created a 360-degree approach, not just a school ERP, not just a content management, not just learning management, not just one thing or the other. We created a framework that if a school had nothing, we can help them get ready in a week's time to go to the next stage. From the basic infrastructure at hardware level, network level, no matter what the challenges, we can meet that. But what's most important is we are able to connect the teachers and students and in such a way that they can learn from each other. We can personalize education. Each a teacher can understand how what every child is evolving, what are the challenges, what are the strengths, how to play with that. So that is happening. But pedagogy is a totally different matter. That evolves at its own pace. So I just wanted to separate the two things. Most of the edutech challenges are about around delivery. There will be some components of pedagogy that will happen because whenever you change the medium, a few changes will happen. But those are different sets of questions. And of course, I'll leave it to Dr. Ram and Dr. Gangwani to handle that. And over to you.
Thank you, sir. I think that aptly sort of summarizes the all the disruption that has happened in 1 year in terms of the way learning changed. I will quickly like to have an educator's view. Probably I'll leap up to Dr. Usha Ram. Ma'am, can you talk about the fact all the disruptions that happened, all the way
Yeah.
EdTech stepped in? So are these disruptions are just beginning of a whole new journey in learning? Am I correct in saying so?
Thank you so much, Yojana, and Satish has really given a gist of a lot of points that we had to take up. First of all, my salutations to all the teacher fraternity. It goes without saying that the teachers are the backbone of any educational system, and we all know that they have worked like warriors during this pandemic. So we need to really applaud this. A sudden paradigm shift did not deter them, and their enthusiasm remained the same. Teachers are like oxygen from education point of view. I take them as the main pillars, which even Satish ji just talked. Now
Totally, ma'am.
Yojana, I'll just touch the challenges. I'll not come to strengths now. I'll just come to the challenges that we are facing today because of this pandemic and the COVID-19. That is the situation. Now,
Okay.
COVID-19 has caused an unprecedented disruption of education. More than 90% of school population is suffering due to this. No
Mhm.
proper online connectivity. Sitting at home has brought emotional, social, academic, mental health issues. So many issues have come up because they are not able to cope with that. I'm just talking about the challenges right now. Okay.
Of
And
course,
then
of course.
uh, difficult situation, not conducive to environment when you are at home. There's a lot of disturbance, noise, one room set house, two room set house, and there are two kids who are studying. So there are two connections that we require. You know, how many people have those many connections, in the house? And then economically
Absolutely.
weaker section students, they are left stranded. Our economically weaker section students are stranded. They do not have the gadgets that are required, and the broadband internet connections they don't have. And then there is another, to ensure privacy, safety, security, cyber crime. These are certain things which are the challenges we are facing these days. I'm talking about the challenges that we are facing. Then there's a lot of you know patience required, emotional stability, conducive environment of tolerance during the tough time of pandemic. Who's to do it? Parents on one side, the family, and the teachers and the educators and the school on the other side. So we have to have a
Totally.
balance between both of them. And then the parents, family, they become the pillars of strength for students at home. Earlier, the children were going to school, and a lot of things were anchored by the teachers, by the peer, by so many. Now everything is at home. They attend the class online and then they're in the house. So it's the parents who have to really play a very vital role. And then there's another word called spotlight syndrome, which
Okay.
the children are missing. They have a habit of interacting, hugging each other, liking each other, talking to teachers. So they're missing that. There are children who look for their kind of attention seeking behavior. They're not
Of
getting
course.
that, you know. And
Mhm.
then nurturing and developing 21st century skills among the students is foremost. And for that, we are struggling. Teachers need more teaching training. Just now, Satish even talked about it. We need more of teaching training to handle virtual classroom teaching. We cannot say
Exactly.
that we have reached to a level of perfection. No, sorry. We need to go, though, of course, we have tried our best. Teachers have done a lot, but we really need to go ahead and really prepare our teachers for that. And so, in service training, and then the NEP, the National Education Policy, is talking about all this. They're talking
Mhm.
about that how this paradigm shift has really brought in so much of difference. The core competencies, the learning outcomes are very important. How are we able to achieve? Are we able to achieve virtual classrooms, or we have to have some other systems? So there are going to be lots and lots of things that we need to do. It's not just being that, but then these challenges are there and we are all facing it, and I'm sure we'll come out with that. I'll take up the strengths later on when you ask me this question. Thank you so much. I've just shared the challenges with you right now.
Totally,
Thank you.
ma'am. I'll get back to some of the things that you mentioned here because they seem eye openers of sorts. And with that, you mentioned something very particularly interesting, which is equitable learning.
Yeah.
You mentioned about the strengths. You mentioned about how different people face different challenges. Maybe some kids are in different locations. I'd like to take up that point with Mr. Shantanu Jha. He being the founder of a learning management system, I'm sure he would have a deeper insight into the equitable learning facet of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Hello? Yes.
So I so I think it's really quite insightful Mrs. Ram, as well as Satish, to bring this up, because I think that this equitable learning issue is probably the one that speaks most deeply. India already has reasonably good quality of education at the high end. And at the high end, we already see that people are reasonably well adapted to using technology, and there's a fairly rich ecosystem of options available. I think it's very much at the lower end. 50% of Indian students are in villages, right? I'd say probably 70% of them, 70% of those students, we're talking about one-room schoolhouses. There really isn't much. These are villages of fewer than 1,000 people. They don't really have electricity. Very few people have smartphones or any devices. As has already been mentioned, what we had tried to do at Edufront, inspired in part by the One Laptop Per Child project, is speak to those issues, speak to the real grassroots problems that we see with these students. Of course, you can't speak to everything, but what you can do is design software around speaking to different learning styles, right? There always is a question of, can you take pedagogy, right? Different styles of teaching for different styles of learning, and encode them in the software itself, right? So then the question about the software is not just, can it be artificial intelligence to help the students? Can it just be an administrative aid? The question is, how can it become a virtual assistant overall for the teacher in particular, right? Because the teacher has to be the central natural conduit for these things, right? And the students will rise with them.
Yes, of course. I think that brings us to a very important segment that I really wanted to talk for long. In India, the education system has traditionally been the Guru Shishya Parampara, which is education plus emotional bonding with the teachers. With everything going online, I'm sure teachers are trying their level best to take care of the emotional aspects of the students as well, connecting with students on one-to-one basis. Like ma'am said, a lot of students like to be in the spotlight syndrome, etc. When the schools restart, probably, hopefully, with the vaccine now here, we'll soon see a day when the schools will reopen. Students will be back in action. Teachers will be back in the center stage. We'd like to see how the schools will prepare themselves for the reopening, not from infrastructure point of view, but from learning infrastructure point of view. I'd like to really get back to Ma'am Geeta Gangwani here. She's a educator, and her point of view, I think I'd like to take here. Ma'am, could you please take this question?
Yeah, Yojana, before we talk about school reopening, first of all, thank you so much for giving this platform, and sincere thanks to all the other panelists. Very good insights and very powerful points emerged. If you allow me, I want to add on to certain points which were raised by Usha ma'am. The challenges. Because these are points very close to my heart. When we talk about technology, that's the strongest factor that is shaping the educational landscape today. And agreed that in the pandemic times, this was the only respite that by means of which we could keep our teaching learning process on in spite of our school buildings being shut. And so many points have been so wisely shared by Usha ma'am. Just to add a few to these, when it comes to teachers, the added challenge was that they had to manage their households also. With no external help coming in, their own kids, they're all fathers, mothers, uncle, aunts, and grandparents also in the house. So with all the challenges that they had of managing their own personal life, they had to manage their own learning because they were not trained for this online teaching. So they were managing house, they were managing their own learning, and then they were managing the kids online. So it is a triple effort that the teacher has to put. And
absolutely,
online teaching, EdTech, tools have been a wonderful tool. By God's grace, we were able to adapt very proactively. But, I would like to refer to a research paper that was published in July 2020. And the theme was I'll just read the theme from the paper. The greater teaching techniques don't compute over Zoom. And this is by Stephen L. Carte. With due respect to the tech experts here, the paper talks about 4 things which a EdTech tool in a virtual classroom still misses as compared to a traditional classroom. And if I'll tell you, one was that the teacher is not able to feel the room. So while the teacher is online, because of the bandwidth and all, when you tell the children to switch off their cameras, you are not able to see them. You can't see the uneasiness in their body, in their postures, in their eyes, on their faces, and hence no remediation is possible. The second very important factor is that in an online class, humor is missing. And humor,
Again.
proven research is such a vital component of teaching. We don't have to be as teachers stand-up comedians, right? But an occasional humor here and there adds on to that liveliness of the class and drags the child back from that boredom if he's gone into that boredom and he's back into the class. And then, in the physical classroom, the teacher is able to cater to diversity and inclusion. That becomes very difficult in a virtual classroom. All the EdTech now, of course, in the last 8 months, we have now started using various EdTech tools because by means of which we are trying to impart differentiated teaching online too. But that factor is still there. And the last is that children being children, they indulge into multitasking when they're online. And that really reduces their cognitive engagement. So while they are in the class, with their cameras off, on their phone, they are doing messaging or WhatsApp. So there is a diversion and their cognitive engagement reduces drastically. So these were a few challenges I wanted to add to, what the other panelists said. And when you talk about school reopening, in the school, when the schools reopen, of course, we all are geared up for that. One aspect is the infrastructure preparedness. So having thermal scanners, disinfectants, and sanitizer dispensers, whatever. You have to have hand washing areas. You have to multiply your support staff to keep your area clean. You have to have an isolation room. All that is fine. But equal importance is to be given to the fact that when the children come back after a gap of 10 months, maintaining social distancing, still coming in smaller groups, 15 at the most, with masks on, and they're not able to hug and kiss their peers after 10 months also. The other aspect, which is very, very important when we reopen, is the social, emotional quotient of the child. We have to have counseling sessions, inspirational sessions, motivational sessions, and that connect which has been lost physically for last 10 months, and that trust and faith and love, which has not disappeared, but it is hidden somewhere. The child is missing it. That has to be brought back. It cannot be that you call children to school and have the exam on pre-board exam on day one. You bring children to the school, give them a worksheet. There are 10 questions. That is not the way we would like to reopen. We would like to reopen and spend the first few working days, building that connect, that faith, that warmth that the child has been longing for last 10 months. So this is what I would like to say about school reopening. Thank you.
That I think the last bit was particularly interesting because that actually gives an insight into what the coming few days in terms of learning could be. And again, as a mother and as a citizen, I feel that EdTech will slowly seep through, and probably hybrid learning or dual learning, as they call it, would probably be there and probably gain prominence in the time to come. With that, we have spent a lot of time deliberating in what the initial challenges were and how the EdTech world sort of responded to it. And I'll take a cue from ma'am's last words here and probably throw a question at Mr. Satish Jha. So while she's talked about a lot of cognitive behavioral changes and organizing maybe workshops or to bring back that connect between teachers, students, peers, etc., etc. What would be the best way to reimagine education and accelerate the change in teaching and learning?
Thank you. Geeta ji, very good points you made. But let me share with you. We are looking at also the 90% who don't have the infrastructure environment that you have. And that said, second thing I would say is, I'm a child who came from a village. When I left village for a small town, I was missing my village, and then I got used to the town. When I left a small town to bigger town, I got used to bigger town, I forgot a small town. When I became global, I forgot everything else. I remember them as experiences. I don't long for them. Similarly, what's happening here is everything you said is very important, but COVID was not something we chose. It came to us. And humans adapt. Even if you go back to Darwin's times, humans survive because they can adapt better. And we have been very, very adaptive about it. We are responding to a situation. What technology can do is a small part of it. But how we, as humans, come together, as people, we come together. What's happening is parents have become teachers now in some ways in more affluent households. But where parents are not educated, how can they become teacher? So 90% in India, from my point of view, parents can't become teacher because they didn't get educated to begin with. But they're always teaching. They teach wisdom. They teach how to survive. They teach skills which are required to be in their environment. But that is not something which is going to make us what you call demographic dividend. I keep telling people, demographic dividend with people where everyone has skills of being either a sweeper or a worker at the level of lifting one thing from here to there, that skill to imagine, when you can imagine an iPhone or you imagine colonizing another planet, the gap is 30 generations. How do you bridge 30 generations? That's possible. Technology today has made it possible. Why? Because I'll give you an example. When we gave in Khairat school in Raigad district of Maharashtra, some 30 laptops in 2007, I think. I spoke to Sandeep Surve, who got covered in Wall Street Journal and Business in World, whatever, etc., Times of India, as well as Economist. He said, before you gave us the laptops, I used to go to my class. I had 30 students. I will talk to them. They will go back. They'll come next day. I will just go on that way. Now, when they come back, they throw several questions at me, and many of them they will solve themselves. I learned from them. So teacher and student learning dynamics, that began happening because we threw that laptops at them. But before that, it was one-way broadcast. When I came to study at Fletcher School at Kennedy, what I learned was the teacher always said, I'm here. The questions you ask, that's the way I learn. Every teacher said the same thing. Every teacher overseas in the US, not Europe so much. In Europe, it's still a broadcast system. I'm the teacher, I'm the great teacher. And so that is happening, that's going to change. Now about children, I asked my son who was 7 years old, we don't go to school to learn from teachers. We go to school to meet our friends. That's what he said. So that's very, very important. But think of it this way. We are here, 5 of us. We can see you smile and I feel good. If you don't smile, I'll be a little concerned about it. So we have to adapt to those things. Those things technology can't handle. That is our job. Technology can enable. Technology solves a problem which has been identified, but it doesn't really solve emotions. It aids, yes, but it doesn't solve beyond those challenges. Maybe younger generation, I look at them as they are closer to the future than us. And that's why I like to talk to young people, because they see the same challenges we see very differently. So I would say that the questions of emotions will be handled by us, because that is something the technologies have not become yet capable of handling. Technologies can help us in things which are more, touchy-feely. In this case, government of India could do one thing. The first thing they should do is every child should have their own device. We can do that. Government has resources. Our budget has resources. Give them the device, please. Connectivity is already there. There are billion plus telephone connections possible. Just let them. Once this happens, that's when our role gets into play as people who can imagine how technology, the software components come into play. But what Edufront did, what Shantanu did is this. He said, if you have nothing, we can get you started. If you have no devices, we'll give you a device. No connectivity, we'll give that. If you don't have any possibility, we'll give you everything stored in the device. We'll give you a card which will have a terabyte of capabilities. In other words, if no electricity, we'll give you solar panels. So you create a solution in such a way that the person using it doesn't have to spend too much time trying to figure it out, and you make it easy. But learning happens inside our brains. We have no technology for that you just inject. There's no pill for learning. Learning is our own endeavor. And emotions are our own endeavor. And emotions are us. How we emote defines us who we are. So that question is something we want to have a challenge every day. And I prefer a world which is not perfect, because then I have something to do. A perfect world will be so boring after all.
So boring, actually. That
Thank
I
you.
think. Thank you, sir. A lot of interesting pointers coming by. Let me also tell you that our audience here has been pouring in questions over questions, a lot of them related to EdTech, challenges, trends, etc. I'll try to take some moments away from this discussion and try to pick out four important questions that I feel are relevant to this forum. So while I do that, I would request, Ma'am Usha Ram to talk about inclusive learning. What could be the best plan for inclusive learning? Like sir just mentioned that, technology can be an enabler. How best to use these enablers and aids? And like Ma'am Geeta Gangwani said that, when kids come to school, they'll still want to redevelop those connections. So, ma'am, over to you. Please guide us on what could be the best plan for inclusive school openings.
See, thank you so much, Yojana. See, first of all, it's very important that we have to have blended learning. We cannot just have open the school and we say, because there will be some children, they won't come also. And we are giving opportunity. So we have to look at it from that point of view also. Inclusivity, yes, along with that blended teaching. That is the children who are at home, how to look after them and to teach them. And the children who are coming to school, so it's going to be a very big challenge for us. And we cannot get away from it. But then when we are talking about inclusivity in our education system, there are lots and lots of strengths also in it, in the sense that we have AI, artificial intelligence, if I'm to talk about, they have already developed better efficiency. Learning with AI has driven good systems they have made. But then it cannot reach out to all the people, so I'm not going to talk about it. But AI is there, artificial intelligence. The questions are already set. You just have to pick up and you take one question and you'll get 20 more questions with that. So that is another very good point, that when we are talking about inclusivity in our education system, we have to have the physical touch. That's very important. What Geeta said, that goes without saying, that the children want that. Even when they are coming to school, we cannot just start off with that. We have to have at least a week's time. Geeta was talking about 3-4 days. I personally feel 1 week we need to really, talk to them, have a chat with them. The counselors are required. The teachers need to talk to them, because they'll be really disturbed, and especially the smaller kids. I have a grandson and I know how he's going to face when he goes to school. He's not prepared at all. And so he's only, as Satish Ji said, I said, if you want to go to school, he says, I'm looking for my friends. He says, I'm looking for my friends. I'm looking for my playground. I'm looking for toys. I'm looking for my library where we all sit down and we chat. So the children look for all music, dance, art, craft. That is what has to be, looked into. Just having the classroom situation where even half of the children will come, and that also they will all have the mask on their faces. What kind of connectivity we are going to have? So when we are talking about inclusivity in our education system, there is going to be really lots and lots of challenges, but the strengths are also there. Technology is there. For example, now, children are so used to, my grandson, he's just 6-year-old. He knows where is Zoom, where is the Microsoft team, where he has to go, where he has to put in his assignments, where he has to get he says, Daddy, you wait. I know how to do it. So I just don't have to do it. So children have already learned that also. That's you can call it as a plus point, that they know all that. But this is only for the children who have all those facilities.
Exactly.
What just now Satish said, and even, Shantanu said, very important, that all the children should have connectivity is possible, but they should have that gadget in their hands. They should all have, so that they're able to, coming to school is not going to be the same old system. Every child is going to be different, and the teachers also have to prepare themselves. They cannot say that I take up the chapter and that's gone. That 1 year repeated 20 times is not possible at all. It has to be every day's new system, new questions that the children will have. You have to answer those questions to them. They will all have their own views, because they already have so much information available. Now, for example, I was just looking at it, along with their Zoom, Google, Microsoft team, WebEx, Skype, imparters, and then Moodle, Schoolology. I don't know how many of them technology has come up. And the children who have that facility, they've already gone into it. For them, it's very easy. They are able to get it, but only thing is that emotional, social, and the kind of connectivity that they're looking for can happen only in the school. But again, the school has to have, and then in inclusivity, we have children from economically weaker section, then we have children of high strata, then we have children of special needs. The children who
Actually,
have, disabilities, they differently abled children. Now, what we are doing is in our schools, we have special sessions for them. We take those children separately. If you look into some of the good schools, they have a special sessions for the children with special needs, because they cannot really get themselves connected in the classroom situation with all other children. So they are doing differently with them. They take them separately, and they have discussions and all that. And there are children who are not able to cope. The teachers are taking them separately. Parents are writing to them, please do talk to my child. My child is very much disturbed. Please talk to. So teachers are actually doing the counselor's job also. Counselors themselves are also doing. And then, so there has to be lot of blended learning also, teaching also,
Exactly.
which is going to be very different from the system that we had earlier. But I'm sure
Yeah.
with whatever we have, there is going to be creativity, which already creativity, innovations, data literacy, critical thinking, digital and coding skills, emotional intelligence, all these things they're learning along with the blended learning.
Exactly.
So I'm sure the strengths also have to be looked into, the challenges also have to be looked into. And somehow we will be able to achieve and we'll be able to reach to the success. Thank you. If
thank
any
you.
questions, then I'll take it separately.
Of course, ma'am, there are a lot of questions pouring in, like I said, and
Yeah.
some are pouring in with pointed names. I'll quickly jot a few of them for you and for others also. While this topic is on, I'd quickly like to bring in Mr. Shantanu Jha, and let's talk about, how can technology support the educators? I'm totally talking from imparting education perspective, the professionals, the teachers, the academicians, how technology would sort of be the biggest enabler and maybe the leap that education has always needed in all these years.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question, and I think it dovetails very nicely with what was just mentioned about blended learning, right? And why blended learning is the paradigm we ultimately must support, right? At the end of the day, something like Baiju's, excellent as it may be across various dimensions, in terms of technology, in terms of marketing and distribution, it can't speak to everything because it doesn't sit in the school itself, right? It is not a modality for augmentation of the learning experience as most people experience it and as most people should experience it, right? Because as has been mentioned by almost every panelist here, education is not merely the transmission of facts or even concepts, but in part a process of socialization, right? In terms of what education technology really can do concretely, I'd say we have to look at it at a few levels, right? The first level, I'd say, is something akin to administrative automation. This is often called something like an ERP. And it's very common, I'd say, in sort of the top 10 percentile of the Indian market. But I don't think it's yet appreciated how important the idea of taking away paperwork from all the teachers, all the administrators, right? Taking it away, abstracting it away, and really making it something easily repeatable, easily automated really is. Because every second a teacher is spending on paperwork is 1 second she's not spending attending to a particular student's needs. When we talk about, the inclusion and equitable learning, it could be a solution as simple as that. You give the time back to the teacher, and the teacher is able to take that and give it back to the student who needs it most. Probably at the second layer, we can talk about something akin to learning management systems. That at the end of the day comes down to simply transmission of content, right? What's the best medium modality for giving access to the content, whether it's videos, slides, or whatever best suits the school or teacher or students in question. I think, actually there's been relatively little innovation in this space thus far. There are lots of great Indian EdTech companies, I'm very sanguine, very bullish about the space in general. I think great things are being done in India on this, but I don't think anybody has actually gone beyond simply having an integration with Zoom or Microsoft Teams, right?
Okay.
This remains the state of the art in terms of learning management technology for the most part. We've tried to do something a little different at Edufront, but I really don't think we've gone very far beyond that. And has been pointed out, there are a number of problems there as well, right? It doesn't facilitate real human-to-human interaction. The teacher doesn't get great granularity into which students are paying attention and which students aren't, and so on. And of course, the third layer, and again, this is something that Edufront specializes in, would be the artificial intelligence layer, right? This is almost letting the teacher set the path, and then the student, in an almost completely independent fashion, can learn what they need and have software that discerns where the defects in their knowledge are and allows them to immediately and rapidly rectify it. I think this has been shown in the academic literature on pedagogy to be the single most effective way of teaching anybody anything.
Okay.
I think that's really the holy grail for all of education technology. We at Edufront have certainly tried to make great strides in that direction. And again, we're particularly focused on this underprivileged group of students, that 50% that suffers most from the inequity in distribution of educational resources. So I think, again, I've sort of laid out these three layers. I broadly say pretty much everything that happens in education technology is going to fit into one of those three parts.
Thank you, Shantanu. With so much insights, it seems almost that there are a lot of people in the tech space who are ready to support the professionals, educators, academicians. I'd quickly like to take a point from Ma'am Geeta Gangwani. She had mentioned about different aspects of to take care of when the schools open. I'd really like to take some pointers from her on, how to maintain the what would you say, emotional well-being, mental well-being for children and the educators when the schools open up. Ma'am, can you please take this question for us? Hello?
Just a second. Yeah, I was on mute.
No.
Thank you, Yoshna. So, as I said that there is a fear in the minds of not only the students but also the parents, and it's not only the parents but also the teachers regarding reopening. All schools have made an exhaustive SOP, and there are SOPs which have come from WHO, from UNESCO, from MHRD. Still, that apprehension towards reopening is very much visible. It's very much in the air. And therefore, when you have to target, what you have to target is a mindset of all stakeholders. And there are simple things that the schools are planning. For example, the first step towards planning is parent orientation. Because the circular has come for reopening in Delhi from 18th of Jan. So like in my school, my parent orientation is scheduled for Sunday. And this is being conducted by professionals aided by me, right? So targeting the mindset of the parent, because the children being children are still longing to come back, but the parent being parent is still scared and apprehensive about the school, So that trust building and the information to be given to the parent regarding the school preparedness is very, very important. So therefore, there are various things that we are doing. All the schools are doing. I'm talking about private schools, because our experiences with private schools, again, the percentage of such schools will be less as compared to the total scenario in India. But most of us, what we are doing is we have prepared our schools, maintaining social distancing, all that is required, the signages, the furniture arrangements, the footnotes and everything. So those videos are being shot and they are being shared with the community. Parents are being addressed. There's a list of do's and don'ts which is being shared with the parents. And then there is exhaustive training of not only the teaching staff as to how to handle the students once they are back, looking at their emotional well-being, but there's exhaustive training of the support staff also. Because when children come to school, it is not only the teachers, but the peons, the support staff, the security guards, and even the Safai Karamcharis. And the training part also includes the training of the Safai Karamcharis for maintaining proper health and hygiene and sanitation conditions in the school. So, this is very, very important. And once in school, the teacher has to connect to the child. There are inspirational videos that we have made a list of, which would be shown to the children. And, the worldwide, how the schools have reopened and the joy and euphoria of coming together, that could be shown, motivational stories, jokes. The first 3-4 days has to be breaking the wall and bringing that warmth in. So that is what I have to
Thank
say
you
about
so
the schools.
thank you so much.
If you give me a minute, I would like to add
Please.
what Shantanu Ji said. I just want to, share this, that I think most of our schools are using that AI enabled. So I don't want to name the software or the company because I don't want to go commercial. But in maths, especially, for helping out the students who really need help, there is that software where the children attempts questions which are age appropriate. The moment the child does one question wrong, the system throws to the child which the questions which are of the lower concept and the same level, and unless the children does those lower level questions conceptually correct, then only he's thrown a HOD or a higher order thinking skill question. So I think most of us are using such applications which are AI based, and now teachers are being trained for AR also. So there are a group of teachers who are very computer savvy. So AR and VR is again being targeted, but it's a slow journey. We need help of experts, of course, but we are, moving in that direction. And
So
technology
clearly,
is a boon. If AR and VR comes to the classroom, we already have 3-dimensional interactive boards, right? Which are working very well, and the students get a very good feel. And if AR and VR comes to classrooms, the classrooms will totally change. So we
totally
are
changed. I think the way I see as a parent and as a citizen, typically there are 5 pillars which will lead edtech. First is the students themselves, second is the parents, third is educators, fourth is facilitators, and fifth and most important one is holistic education systems, which ensure that all of these 4 other wheels are their needs are taken together, and all the cogs of the wheels are sort of oiled together to ensure that a smooth learning happens. So like I promised you, I have culled in a few questions. There's a question for Mr. Satish Jha. So there's a pointed question for you with name. There's a person called Anuradha Ghosh. She says, do you think the education system would go totally virtual in the near future, considering the fact that a lot of schools and colleges have become efficient in managing it? Mr. Jha,
Yes,
please take it up.
thank you. As we become better at using technologies, yes, that will happen in the sense that people adapt to that, and virtual will be the norm. We got so used to it. In fact, when I talk to employees, they say we dread the day we have to go back to the offices. And the offices, companies are cutting down space. If they're going to let 50% space go away, they're telling employees not to come. Some companies decided to tell the employees, you don't have to come. We are very comfortable, because they got used to it. So I think the virtuality, in fact, we are all virtual and yet real. In fact, most of us haven't met, right? And we still know each other. They feed for each. We look at each other as human beings without ever having met each other, right? So
Right.
as we become more adaptive of technologies, we will take that as that's the norm, and virtuality will be the norm, basically. Having said that, we still long for coming together, and except that it won't be the Kumbh Mela anymore. It's going, it's going to be more of, I mean,
Small pockets of people.
today is Kumbh Mela anyway. Yes. Having said that, I mean, that is something which will evolve, and each society will find its own expression. In Europe, in US, it's a very different way of looking at it. In China, in India, in Africa, it'd be another way of looking at it. It depends on how you are looking at your own roots and your own preferences, cultural preferences as such, what you like, and people should have, the opportunity to and right to do so. So I don't think we are going back to the same old world of buildings. And I keep telling all the education ministers I talk to, Education happens, learning happens in the minds of people. It doesn't happen in the buildings. It happens in relationships and communication. Do you feel in this group that we are not talking to each other, talking with each other? We don't feel, right? So
You
this
have
is
a point
becoming,
here.
we are very comfortable talking to each other like this, and we feel we know each other, right? So similarly, it's evolving, and I think as time goes by, we'll get more used to it, and human beings adapt. So we are adapting to the new situations. Yeah, I don't know if it answers your
Thank you.
question. Yeah, but
I hope it. I hope it did. Next question is related to something that you mentioned here and something that Ma'am Usha Ram had mentioned earlier about blended learning. Let me take this question to her only. Ma'am, there's a person called Sangeet Aklesh. He says, "What will be the new norm of learning? Do we have to fully depend upon blended learning only?"
Thank you so much, Yojana. No, not at all. See, first of all, your point, I think community also need to be involved. I'm coming to your point when you said,
Okay.
teachers, parents, and, everybody. But community, because what happens that they will not be coming in the school buses. So the cars will be there, autos will be there. So there's a lot of problem of the community. So we need to actually request either RWAs, residents, welfare societies to please have patience when our parents are coming to drop the children. So that's also going to be a very major problem in some of the localities where the schools are within the RWAs, the community. So that's one point. Now coming to, when we are talking about blended learning, see, self-learning also will be very important now. Self-learning has to be developed. What we have to, it's not the chapter that we are talking about. If as a teacher, I understand what is the gist of it, what is it that I'm trying to convey to them, if I'm able to reach out to the core competencies, if I'm able to reach out to them with my, what is the end result. Now, blended learn, because there cannot be all the children coming to school, all the children sitting at home. So that is the blended
Actually,
learning that I'm talking about. So
okay.
as teachers, I just take myself, suppose as a teacher, I have to prepare myself. How is it I'm going to deal with them when I'm in the classroom situation, and how it has to be done, what we are doing now with them in the when they are sitting in their houses. So it has to be that blended learning, which has to be prepared by the teachers. And I really do not know, as a principal, if I think of it, how can the same teacher be in the school and then she looks after those children also? Probably I have to have co-scholastic before and then subjects little later. So the same teacher who's teaching maths or science or English has to come back to blended also, the children who are at home. So I'm going to have a lot of confusion in that, because I have to
Actually,
cater to the needs of both the sides. The children who are, because if you see the circular given by CBSE and by MHRD and by the Directorate of Education, they have said it's not mandatory. So once you say it is not mandatory, as a parent, if I ask you, you will say, Usha ma'am, I think I would like to keep my child at home and I would like
actually,
to have the learning taking place. But there are other parents who would say, no, we would like to send the children because we are giving you acceptance and we are doing that. So it is going to be really a task for all of us, but I'm sure we will be able to reach out, because see, the technology is really has improved so much. There's so much into it. Actually, if you look into it, we were talking about AI. It's there in English also. The lessons are already there. The questions are there. They are corrected by them. So I was really amazed when somebody showed me that. They came and showed me, they said, ma'am, this is what we have. I was taken aback. I said, wow. So, there's so much information available to us. But then from the student's point of view, that self-learning has to develop. We are so used to books. We are so used to teachers. So we have to create that sense of belonging with the books, with the lessons. So you have to have that feeling that yes, I have to self-learning. Why should I do it only because my teacher has told me? So how do we create that sense of feeling? That also we need to do with them. We have to have sessions with the children so that they understand that they have to have self-learning also. If I want any learning outcomes, if I really want a change in my pedagogical systems, or blended learning, we have to prepare ourselves, even our children, and all of us, and especially the teachers. Teachers have a real, you can say, Herculean task in front of them. It's only, I don't know how as managers or management we have to work it out, you know, when to take that and when to take that. Already now what Geeta talked about, teachers, if you look at them from morning 7 till night 10 o'clock, after the classes they have to do the corrections, then they have to have special sessions, then they have to have meeting with the coordinators, then the administrators, the principal and the PTMs, the parent teacher. So they are completely, if you ask me, I think the mental health conditions of teachers are to be looked into more than the parents or the students, because they are the ones who are the at home and sitting at home and not actually doing the work. Which mother-in-law will accept that, So it's going to be, if you talk to the teachers, they really look hassled, they really find it very difficult. This blended learning is a part of it, and we have to accept it, and it has to go on.
Thank you, ma'am. You put it in like a very humorous and a nice way, but yes, the challenge is pertinent. Professionals, educators, they themselves are going through a lot of stress. I have a pile of questions coming up on that, but I'll just take one which I think is relevant to this panel, and I will direct it to Mr. Shantanu Jha, a person called Ajit Hukurikar. He says, what are the various strategies that a school teacher, that a school leader has to keep in mind to overcome challenges post-COVID? He's talking about leaders, principals, and maybe the senior people who are the decision makers.
Sure. So obviously, I can only speak to this at a second-hand level. I think the august Mrs. Usha Ram will have some more direct insights on the topic. Speaking about it from a kind of a technological level, I'd say probably the biggest challenge most of these schools are going to face is simply adopting the technology that can facilitate a blended learning model in the first place. Rollout of technology, especially in the cases where the children don't have the devices, as is the case with, say, many of the schools in tier 2 or tier 3 cities that we deal with, is really quite complex, right?
Mm-hmm.
You need a logistics network in place. You need people on the ground who can handle distribution of the hardware. You need people on the ground who can train every teacher, every administrator who needs to touch the software with the software. And of course, you would really want that to be every human resource in your school, because the more of that gets automated, the less work you have to do in the future. These rollout questions, these implementation questions can be very, very thorny. And of course, coming back to a theme that I think all of us have repeatedly touched on so far, there's a huge question about how the technology can inequitably change the landscape of learning in a school. Students that did well in an in-classroom environment may no longer be doing as well in a technologically enabled one, right?
Okay.
Simply because the learning styles have changed. I think, and suddenly you have, especially if you run a high-end private school where expectations run high, you may have a situation where the parents are very angry about the adoption of technology because their student who is doing very well is suddenly feeling alienated and doing rather poorly.
Mm-hmm.
These are the kinds of issues that we've seen come up repeatedly from school to school. And again, I think Mrs. Usha Ram can speak with far more authority and gravitas on this topic than I can.
Great. I think, but you also gave us a different perspective and maybe industry perspective that was much required. I have a lot of questions piling up on this question, but from skills aspect, I would direct it to Geeta ma'am, a person called Swaran Jithe. She says, how to improve the technical as well the intrapersonal skills of my staff. She's an educator and she's asking from a leader's perspective. Hello.
Thank you. Yeah. These skills of the teachers, shows what the question has been directed is about CPT. So first thing we need to understand is when we talk about the skill set of the teacher, you want to develop the skill set of the teacher. We cannot have these standalone one-day workshops. The teacher goes, attends a webinar, attends a workshop, and that is it. So what normally any good school would do, and we have done it again for our school in the pandemic time, is first of all to organize any kind of CPD, that is continuous professional development program. First of all, there has to be a competency framework of the school. So the school leader has to define what is the skill set that I desire in every employee of my school. It could be teaching, administrative, support staff as well. So once you list down the exhaustive skill set list, then you have ways and means of evaluating your teachers as to where they are currently in that skill set. Now, that can be done in multiple ways. It can, one component of it could be self-assessment by the teacher. One component could be peer assessment. It could be assessment by the seniors, by the principal, or if you really want to go it in the scientific way, you can hire an expert agencies. There are many reputed, well-known agencies who come and do exhaustive skill set analysis, that is also called need analysis or gap analysis. So once you know what is the gap in skills for the teacher, and mind you, every teacher may have a different need. So normally what we do is we have a CPD, a workshop for all teachers in one go. And that's a workshop. It is done. Aapne सीखा, कुछ सीखा, नहीं सीखा, it's okay. The follow-up is also not there. So once you do the need analysis, then you break your staff into groups, and based on their needs, you have a structured, continuous, continuous as well as staggered. So you stagger it over a period of time, but make it continuous, right? So in the entire academic year, maybe 4, 5, 6 sessions on that particular need of the group of teachers. And there has to be exhaustive follow-up on the extent of understanding and the extent of implementation that the teacher brings in her classroom pedagogy. Because unless you follow up and measure the extent of implementation that the teacher, what the teacher has learned through that CPT, whether she's able to implement it and convert it to action, that follow-up also needs to be done. So that makes a complete cycle of skill development program for a teacher. That's my understanding. And I think it works like that very scientifically.
Thank you, ma'am, for those pertinent pointers. And with that, I think we all have touched upon different aspects related to EdTech, learning, from professional skill sets to how different schools are managing the online learning at their end. And most importantly, we had elaborate sessions on the million-dollar questions, how are schools preparing to open up and what the picture could look like. I must thank all my panelists here who spared their valuable time to come down and speak and bring such enriching thoughts and share with our audience. And a special thanks to a gracious audience who's been pouring questions over questions for our panelists here. Thank you so much. I hope we all have had some very interesting takeaways from this discussion. This is Yojana Sharma signing off from this webinar from Edufront and TechGig. Thank you, everybody. Hope you have a great evening. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much.